I stepped into the palliative care unit at Sunnybrook Hospital, balancing a Tim Hortons coffee in one hand and my father's favorite magazines in the other. It was a Thursday afternoon in late September, and the Toronto autumn had painted the trees outside in brilliant oranges and reds. My father loved fall. He used to say it reminded him of new beginnings, which seemed cruelly ironic now that he was dying. Dad had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 5 months earlier. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe 8 if he was lucky. He wasn't lucky. The cancer had spread aggressively, and now we were looking at weeks, not months. At 85, he'd lived a full life, but that didn't make watching him fade any easier. What did make it easier, or so I thought, was that my younger brother David had finally stepped up. For the first time in his 58 years, David was being responsible. He visited Dad every single day, sometimes twice. He'd moved back to Toronto from Vancouver specifically to be closer. He handled Dad's medications, drove him to appointments, even helped him with his banking when Dad's hands became too shaky to write. I was grateful, genuinely grateful. David and I had never been close. While I'd gone into engineering, built a stable career at Ontario Hydro, married my high school sweetheart Patricia, and raised 3 kids in Mississauga, David had bounced from one failed venture to another. A restaurant in Vancouver that lasted 8 months. A consulting business that was really just him advising his friends for free. 2 divorces. Perpetual money problems. But people change, right? Facing mortality changes people. I thought Dad's illness had finally given David the wake-up call he needed. I should have known better. The discovery happened almost by accident. Dad had asked me to update his iPhone during my Wednesday visit. He was frustrated because his banking app wasn't working properly, and he thought maybe an iOS update would fix it. I'd told him I'd come back Thursday with my laptop and handle it properly. So there I was, sitting beside his hospital bed, connecting his phone to my MacBook. Dad had dozed off, the morphine making him sleep more and more. Patricia always said I was too helpful for my own good, but I figured while he was sleeping, I might as well check what was going on with his phone. Maybe clear some space, delete old photos, the usual maintenance. That's when I saw the banking apps. Plural. Dad had always been with CIBC, had the same account since 1962, but now there were 3 different banking apps on his phone. CIBC, Scotiabank, and TD. I felt my stomach tighten. Why would an 85-year-old man with terminal cancer need 3 different bank accounts? I opened the CIBC app first. Dad had written his passwords in a little notebook he kept in his nightstand. Bless him, the old-school way. His main account showed a balance of $4,200. That seemed low, very low. Dad had been a mechanical engineer for Ford for 40 years, had a solid pension, had been careful with money his whole life. When Mom died 6 years ago, I knew he'd had close to $400,000 in savings and investments. My hands were shaking as I opened the transaction history. E-transfers, dozens of them. $5,000 to David Walker. $8,000 to David Walker. $3,500 to David Walker. Going back months. I felt cold despite the warm hospital room. I opened the Scotiabank app. Balance. $1,800. More transfers to David. The TD app was the worst. It had been opened just 2 months ago, and there was only $600 left. The transaction history showed it had been opened with $85,000, transferred from Dad's investment account. Every penny had been systematically drained through e-transfers and bill payments. I sat there staring at the phone screen, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. My brother, my own brother, had stolen from our dying father. I pulled up the text messages next. There were dozens between Dad and David. My hands were actually trembling as I scrolled through them. David, Dad, the contractor needs another payment for the Oakville property. Can you send $12,000? Dad, that seems like a lot. Are you sure? David, Dad, we talked about this. The renovation is expensive, but it'll triple in value. This is your investment, remember? You'll profit from this. Dad. Okay, son. I trust you. Further back. More messages. David. Dad, I need to invest $50,000 in the tech startup I told you about. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. We'll make millions. Dad. David. I don't know. That's a lot of money. David. Dad, you're not going to be around much longer. Do you want to leave your sons with nothing? Or do you want to leave us with a thriving business? This is for Michael and his kids too. Don't you want to help your grandchildren? I felt bile rising in my throat. He'd used Dad's mortality against him. He'd weaponized the fact that our father was dying. I kept scrolling. There was a photo David had sent Dad. A glossy brochure for a commercial property in Oakville. Except I recognized the photo. I'd seen that exact building featured in a Toronto Star article about successful real estate developments. This wasn't David's project. He just downloaded a photo and sent it to Dad as proof. My father stirred in his bed. His eyes opened slowly, clouded with pain and medication. When he saw me, he smiled weakly. "Michael," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're still here." I looked at him. This man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me with my calculus homework, who'd given me away at my wedding, who'd held each of my children when they were born. He looked so small in that hospital bed. So vulnerable. "Dad," I said carefully, "I need to ask you about your bank accounts." His expression changed. Not confusion, something else. Shame, maybe. Or fear. "David said you wouldn't understand," he whispered. "He said you'd be angry." "Dad, how much money have you given David?" He closed his eyes. "It's an investment, Michael. He's building something. He's finally got his life together. After everything, he deserves a chance." "Dad, there's no investment. There's no Oakville property. There's no tech startup. Don't talk about your brother that way." His voice was stronger now, defensive. "He's been here every day. Every single day. Where were you?" That stung. I'd visited 3 times a week, called daily, but I had a life. Patricia, my kids, my grandchildren. I couldn't abandon everything like David apparently had. Except David hadn't abandoned anything. He'd been here because there was money to extract. "Dad, I need to see your banking papers, your statements." "David handles all that now." I gave him power of attorney. My hands shake too much to sign things anymore. Power of attorney. Of course he did. I felt my jaw clench. "When did you give him POA?" "May, I think. Or June. After the diagnosis. He said it would make things easier. 5 months ago, right when the cancer was confirmed. Right when Dad would have been most vulnerable, most scared, most willing to trust. I spent the next hour going through every app, every account, every transaction I could find on Dad's phone. By the time I finished, I documented $230,000 in transfers to David over the past 5 months. $230,000. Dad's entire life savings gone. When David showed up for his evening visit at 6, I was ready. I'd taken photos of everything on my own phone. I'd called my lawyer friend Tom Chen from my days at Hydro. I'd even called Patricia and told her I'd be late for dinner. David walked in carrying a Tim Hortons bag. Probably Dad's dinner. He was wearing expensive shoes. I noticed that immediately. Those were $400 Cole Haan loafers. For a man who'd been broke 6 months ago, that was interesting. "Mike," he said, looking surprised. "I didn't know you were still here." "We need to talk," I said. "Outside." Dad was sleeping again, thankfully. I didn't want him to hear this. In the hallway, I didn't waste time. I saw Dad's phone. I saw the bank accounts. "I know what you've been doing." David's face went through a fascinating series of expressions. Surprise, fear, then something that hardened into defensiveness. "Dad wanted to invest in my business," he said. "He believed in me." "What business, David? The fake Oakville property? The non-existent tech startup? Which business exactly?" "You don't understand. I'm building something. The money's not gone. It's invested." "Show me," I said. "Show me the business. Show me the property deed. Show me the incorporation papers. Show me anything." He couldn't, of course. He stood there in the hospital hallway, beside a vending machine humming softly, and he couldn't show me a single shred of evidence that any business existed. "You know what I think?" I said, keeping my voice level. I think you saw Dad was dying, and you saw an opportunity. I think you manipulated a sick, elderly man out of his life savings. I think you used power of attorney to drain his accounts. And I think that's called elder financial abuse. I'm his son, David said, and his voice had an edge to it now. He wanted to help me. After everything he did for you, paying for your university, helping with your house down payment, he wanted to finally do something for me. So you stole from him? I didn't steal anything. He gave it to me willingly. Did he know he was giving you his entire life savings? Did you tell him that the $50,000 for the tech startup would leave him with almost nothing? Did you mention that when you convinced him to open new accounts? David's jaw tightened. You've always looked down on me. Perfect Michael, with his perfect job and perfect family. You never struggled. You never needed help. You don't know what it's like. This isn't about me, David. This is about you stealing from our dying father. I didn't steal. And you can't prove anything. Dad gave me POA. Dad approved every transaction. It's all legal. That's where he was wrong. I'd spent the afternoon on the phone with Tom Chen, and Tom had been very clear about the legalities. Power of attorney doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. You have a fiduciary duty to act in the person's best interest. Draining a dying man's life savings is not in his best interest. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to return every penny, and you're going to resign as power of attorney immediately. If you do that tonight, I won't call the police. David laughed. Actually laughed. Call the police? For what? Dad will tell them he gave me the money willingly. You think they'll believe you over him? Over us? He had a point. Dad was defending David even now, even after I'd tried to explain. But David had underestimated something. I'd spent 40 years as an engineer. I knew how to document things. I knew how to build a case. I didn't argue with him further. I just walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. Patricia held my hand in the darkness of our bedroom in Mississauga and let me talk it out. She'd never liked David, had always said there was something off about him, and she was trying very hard not to say, I told you so. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to get Dad's money back, I said, and I'm going to make sure David never does this to anyone else. The next morning, I was at Tom Chen's office at 9. Tom specialized in elder law and estate litigation. He'd handled my mother's estate 6 years ago. He was good, he was thorough, and he was angry when I showed him everything. This is textbook elder financial abuse, Tom said, scrolling through the photos I'd taken of Dad's banking transactions. The power of attorney, the timing right after diagnosis, the manipulation through texts, the fake investment opportunities. Michael, this is criminal. Dad won't press charges, I said. He's defending David. That's common, Tom said. Victims of elder abuse often protect their abusers, especially when it's family. Shame, denial, fear of being alone. But here's the thing. You don't need your father's cooperation to file a complaint with the authorities. And you can definitely pursue civil action to recover the funds. We spent 3 hours building a strategy. Tom would file for emergency guardianship, arguing Dad wasn't competent to manage his finances while under terminal illness and heavy medication. We'd submit the banking records showing the systematic drain of his accounts. We'd get the POA revoked. Then we'd file both criminal complaints and civil suit to recover the money. This won't be fast, Tom warned, and it won't be easy. David will fight. Your father might fight too. I don't care, I said. It's the right thing to do. The next step was talking to Dad when he was lucid. I waited until Monday, when the palliative care team had adjusted his medication and he was more alert. Patricia came with me. We needed a witness for everything now. Dad, I said, pulling up a chair beside his bed, I need you to really listen to me. I need you to understand what's happening. I showed him printed bank statements. Tom had helped me get them from the banks, using my old power of attorney documents from years ago, before David's. I showed him the transaction history. I showed him the text messages where David had manipulated him. Dad stared at the papers for a long time. His hands were shaking, but not from the illness this time. 230,000, I said gently. Your entire retirement savings, gone in 5 months. Dad, there is no business. There's no investment. David has a gambling problem. He's had it for years. He's been banned from Casino-Rama. Did you know that? Dad's eyes filled with tears. He said he was clean. He said he'd changed. I know what he said. But look at the evidence, Dad. Look at what actually happened. Patricia handed him a tissue. Dad wiped his eyes, and for the first time, I saw him really see what David had done. What do I do? He whispered. You let me handle it, I said. You focus on your health. Let Tom and me take care of this. That afternoon, Tom filed for emergency guardianship in Ontario Superior Court. He also filed a complaint with the Toronto Police Service's Elder Abuse Unit. And he sent a letter to David's last known address, informing him that we were pursuing both criminal and civil action. David showed up at my house that night. Patricia saw him through the front window and immediately called me upstairs from my home office. I stepped out onto our porch in the October evening. The street was quiet, leaves skittering across the driveway. David looked terrible. Unshaven, wrinkled clothes, the expensive shoes scuffed. You can't do this, he said, without preamble. I already did. Michael, please. You'll destroy me. I'll go to prison. You should have thought about that before you stole from our dying father. I didn't steal. God, why can't you understand? He wanted to help me. He was happy to help me. You're the one traumatizing him by dragging all this legal stuff into it. Where's the money, David? He couldn't answer. He just stood there on my porch, and he couldn't tell me where $230,000 had gone in 5 months. You gambled it away, didn't you? I said quietly. Just like you always do. You had access to Dad's accounts, and you couldn't help yourself. I had some bad luck, some investments that didn't pan out, but I can pay it back. Just give me time. Drop the court case, drop the police complaint, and I'll pay it back. With what money, David? You're broke. You've always been broke. I'll figure it out. I always do. Not this time, I said. This time, there are consequences. He tried threatening me then. Said I'd regret this. Said I was tearing the family apart. Said Dad would never forgive me. When none of that worked, he tried begging. Actual tears. On his knees on my porch, begging me to drop it. Patricia called the police. I stayed on the porch until the Peel Regional Police arrived and asked David to leave. He left, but not before telling me I was dead to him. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Tom Chen was ruthless. Within 2 weeks, he'd gotten emergency guardianship approved. I was now Dad's legal guardian, and David's power of attorney was revoked. Tom immediately froze what was left of Dad's accounts and started forensic accounting to trace where the money had gone. The Toronto Police Elder Abuse Unit detective assigned to the case was a woman named Sarah Kowalski. She was in her 40s, professional, and she'd seen cases like this before. Your brother left a digital trail a mile wide, she said during our meeting at 40 College Street. E-transfers, online banking, he documented everything himself. The texts to your father show clear manipulation. The fake property documents are fraud. And the power of attorney abuse is textbook. Will he be charged? I asked. We're building the case now. Elder financial abuse, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. Yes, he'll be charged. Whether he's convicted depends on the Crown and how well he can afford a lawyer. As it turned out, David couldn't afford much of a lawyer. The forensic accountant Tom hired traced the money. $140,000 had gone to online gambling sites and Casino Niagara. Another $50,000 to pay off credit card debt and personal loans. $30,000 to rent on a condo in Toronto and various living expenses, including those $400 Cole Haan shoes. The remaining $10,000 was split between a lawyer's retainer and what appeared to be cash withdrawals at various ATMs across the GTA. There was no business. There had never been a business. There was just David, gambling away our father's life savings while pretending to be the devoted son. Dad declined rapidly through November. The cancer was winning, but he was lucid enough when Detective Kowalski came to interview him at the hospital. He gave a full statement. He admitted David had pressured him, had told him he was dying anyway, and should help his son before it was too late. He admitted he hadn't understood how much money he was giving away because David had handled all the banking. I just wanted to help him, Dad told the detective, crying. I wanted to believe he'd finally gotten his life together. David was arrested on December 3rd. The charges were extensive: theft over $5,000, fraud over $5,000, criminal breach of trust, elder abuse. He made bail, but barely. His ex-wife in Vancouver had to put up her house. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for February, but Dad wouldn't make it that long. He died on December 18th, with Patricia and me and our 3 kids beside him. David wasn't there. He wasn't welcome. At the funeral, David showed up anyway. I didn't cause a scene. It wasn't the time or place. But when he tried to speak during the service, tried to give a eulogy about what a great father Dad was and how much he'd learned from him, I stood up and quietly asked the funeral director to escort him out. People talked, of course. My aunt and uncle wanted to know what was happening, why David and I weren't speaking, why I'd had him removed from his own father's funeral. I told them the truth, all of it. The theft, the manipulation, the gambling, everything. The family fractured after that. Some people believed David's version, that I was jealous and vindictive and had turned Dad against him in his final days. Most people, once they saw the evidence, understood what he'd done. The criminal trial happened in March. David pleaded guilty to avoid trial. His lawyer had advised him that the evidence was overwhelming and a trial would just result in a harsher sentence. He got 18 months in prison and 3 years probation. He was also ordered to pay restitution of $230,000, though everyone knew he'd never be able to pay even a fraction of that. The civil suit Tom filed was more successful. We got a judgment against David for the full $230,000, plus interest and legal fees. Tom put liens on everything David owned or would ever own, garnished his wages, made it so David would spend the rest of his life paying back what he stole. I used Dad's remaining estate, about $30,000 after funeral costs, to establish a scholarship at Toronto Metropolitan University for engineering students. The Robert Walker Memorial Scholarship. It was what Dad would have wanted. Patricia asked me once if I felt guilty about sending my own brother to prison. I told her the truth. I didn't feel guilty at all. David had made his choices. He'd seen our dying father as an opportunity, as an ATM to fund his gambling addiction. He'd stolen Dad's final security, his final peace of mind, his final dignity. What I did feel was angry. Angry that I hadn't seen it sooner. Angry that David had been able to manipulate Dad so easily. Angry that the system made it so simple for someone with power of attorney to abuse that power. But I also felt something else. I felt like I'd honored Dad's memory. Not by letting David get away with it because he's family, but by holding him accountable, by showing that actions have consequences, by making sure that what little was left of Dad's estate went to something meaningful rather than disappearing into David's endless pit of need. Tom Chen told me later that my case had helped change how his firm approached elder abuse. They now immediately red flag any POA that's granted right after a major health diagnosis. They educate families about the warning signs. They make it clear that love doesn't mean letting families steal from you. It's been 2 years now. David got out of prison after serving his full sentence. No early release. I haven't spoken to him. He's tried to reach out through cousins, through old family friends, even through Patricia's sister once. Every time, I've made it clear. He stole from our dying father. There's no coming back from that. Some people think I'm too harsh. That family should forgive. That David has paid his debt to society. But here's what they don't understand. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was 5 months of systematic, calculated theft from a vulnerable, dying man who trusted him completely. This was manipulation, fraud, and betrayal of the highest order. Dad used to say that character is what you do when no one's watching. David thought no one was watching. He thought Dad was too sick, too medicated, too trusting to question anything. He thought I was too busy with my own life to notice. He was wrong on both counts. I think about Dad often. About how hard he worked his whole life, how carefully he saved, how he'd planned to leave something for his grandchildren, about how David took that all away for the temporary high of a casino win or the thrill of an online poker game. But I also think about justice, real justice, not the kind that sweeps things under the rug because he's family or because the victim is gone and can't speak for themselves anymore. The kind that says, "This was wrong. Here are the consequences, and you don't get to walk away from what you've done." If you're reading this, if you have elderly parents, please pay attention. Watch for the warning signs. Sudden changes in financial behavior. A family member who's suddenly very involved in their banking. New accounts or large transfers. Reluctance to discuss finances. These are red flags. And if you see something, don't ignore it because it's family. Don't tell yourself they'd never do that. People do terrible things, especially when they're desperate, especially when they think they won't get caught. My brother stole $230,000 from our dying father. I made sure he paid for it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.